Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis, Shabbat and Secularism, Khilul Shabbos בפרהסיא. We know that the desecration of Shabbos is one of the most serious things in the Torah, so much so that it's considered, certainly when it's done in public, as the same as serving idolatry. Why would that be so? There are many, many mitzvahs in the Torah. Why would particularly Khilul Shabbos be so crucial that if a person desecrates the Shabbos, he's considered as if he's serving idolatry? What's the comparison between idolatry and Shabbos? So we'll get some idea of that in the Gemara that we're learning, which is based on psukim in Parsha Shlach, where Vayu b'nei Yisrael b'midbar, the b'nei Yisrael were in the desert, vayimtsu'u ish mekoshesh eitzim b'yom HaShabbos, and they found somebody on Shabbos who was chopping wood. Vayakrivu oto hamotzim oto mekoshesh eitzim. The people who found him, in other words, the Eidim, the witnesses who saw him chopping wood on Shabbos, which is an Issa d'Oraisa, you're not allowed to do that. They brought him to Moshe and Aaron and to the Beis Din. Vayanichu oto b'mishmar, and they put him in prison. Ki lo forash ma ya'aseh, because the Beis Din didn't know what should be done with this man. That was the case. And there we have one of the sources of prison, which is how it comes into our sugya, where the Gemara says there are times when a person commits an act of violence against another, and we're not sure if the person's going to die from that act or not. If the person's going to die, it's murder. If the person doesn't die, then it's nezikin. So we hold the person in custody until we get clarity as to whether the victim is going to die or the victim will survive. And the Gemara goes in, where do we learn from that you hold the person in custody and so on? This is one of the sources. And on this, the Gemara goes on to say, we've established elsewhere that the mekoshesh eitzim was tzlofchad. The person who chopped the wood was tzlofchad. And we learned back in October in Bava Basra Daf Kuf, we had a whole sugya on tzlofchad, why he did it, what his intention was in doing it. We know that part of his intention was to teach visibly, that people should see visibly the seriousness of Shabbos and what the consequences of Chilul Shabbos is. Says our Gemara brings a brisa, which we had also on Daf Kuf Yutes in Bava Basra. Yodea haya Moshe Rabbeinu shemekoshesh b'mitah shene'amar mechalelei amot yumat. Moshe knew that there's a death sentence for Chilul Shabbos, because it says mechalelei amot yumat, the person who profanes the Shabbat, who desecrates the Shabbos, is put to death. So what was Moshe not sure about? Ela lo haya yodea be'ezo mitah neherag. What he wasn't sure about is what death sentence applies. We know there are four different death sentences, and we're dealing with them all in these prokim of Sanhedrin. The lightest of the death sentences is chenech, is strangulation. The most severe of the death sentences is skila, is a form of stoning. That's what it means when it says it was not explained which death sentence applies. So that they knew that it was a death sentence, and Tzlofchad knew. When he did it, he knew he was going to be put to death, and he wanted that to be as a lesson to the Bnei Yisrael. Says Tosfos, Lo haya yodea be'ezu mitah, va'af agav de mitah stam cheneki. Says Tosfos, what do you mean Moshe didn't know what misa it is? We've got a Gemara in Sanhedrin itself. We had a few daf back on Daf Nun Beis, that when the Torah just says death sentence and doesn't specify what death sentence, it's chenek, it's strangulation. It's the other three that are the exceptions. The norm is chenek. And so much so that chenek isn't even mentioned, strangulation isn't even specifically mentioned anywhere in the Torah. It just says, you shall be put to death, and the assumption is that it will be chenek. And part of the reason is that chenek, firstly, is the lightest, so why give a person more than the lightest of the death sentences if it doesn't specifically say so? And secondly, the Gemara said on Daf Nun Beis that chenek damages the soul but not the body. It leaves the body intact. It leaves the body with its full dignity. It doesn't in any way damage and mutilate the body. And therefore it's the chosen death sentence. It's similar to the death sentence of Hashem himself. When Hashem decides that a person has to die, the body is still intact. He just stops living. So stopping the breathing of a person and so that he dies for lack of breath is a death that is most similar to Mita B'dei Shemayim. And so clearly, if Moshe is in any kind of doubt, it's chenek. The answer is Tosfos. Mitoch hasvara haya medamer la'oved avodas kechovim to beskila. But Moshe said something to himself. He said, yes, normally, if there's no mention of a specific death sentence, it would be chenek, it would be strangulation. But we know that Chilul Shabbos is like Avodah Zorah. The Mechalel Shabbos בפרהסיא ככופר בעיקר, because somebody who publicly profanes the Shabbos, as Tzlofchad did, is like denying the essence of the Torah. The kofar b'maaseh Bereshis is denying the essence of the creation of Bereshis. That's what Chilul Shabbos is. Chilul Shabbos is not just breaking a ritual. Chilul Shabbos is breaking the very foundation on which the entire Torah is based. And Moshe knew that and realized, therefore, if it's like Avedus Kechovim, if it's like idol worship, just like idol worship is skilo, is death through stoning, so that should apply to Chilul Shabbos as well. And that was Moshe's doubt. How did Moshe know that Chilul Shabbos is like Avedus Kechovim? That also, it says Mitoch Hasvora, he realized it's obvious that Chilul Shabbos, when you understand what Chilul Shabbos is, it's obvious that it's like idol worship. And once you know that idol worship is an Isus Skila, maybe Shabbos is an Isus Skila as well. Asks Rabbi Akiva in the Gilayon Hashas, Hasheli, this is a little bit of a problem for me. So Moshe's doubt, according to the way Tosfos is learning, what is Moshe's doubt when he's thinking this through? Tzlofchad profanes the Shabbos in public. What is Moshe's doubt? If he'd done it in private, I would know it's chenek, like any other death sentence that isn't specified. The problem is this was done in public, so it could be like Avodah Zorah. So Hashem comes and says, yes, skila. Imkein adayin minalan ledina de mechal Shabbos betzino beskila. So where do we learn from that desecration of Shabbos betzino in private also gets skila? Dilma had the mekoshesh beskila hainu da Kadosh Baruch Hu iskim mi Moshe Rabbeinu bisvara zu v'dafke b'farhesiyah v'betzino minalan. Maybe what is Moshe's going through this dilemma? I understand that normally you would give a person chenek, you would give a person strangulation. But since Chilul Shabbos is so serious when it's done in public, maybe you've got to give them skila because it's like Avodah Zorah. Says Hashem, yes, you've got to give him skila. Asks Rabbi Akiva, so all Moshe now knows is that when it's done in public, the death sentence is skila. But you don't know about what the death sentence is when it's done in private. That could still be chenek. How do you know from that in private it's also skila? Rabbi Feinstein answers the question. Rabbi Feinstein, his least important claim to fame was that he's Moshe Feinstein's nephew. He was also a close Talmud of all the Gedolim of the previous generation. It's one of my regrets that I didn't meet him, learn with him when I was in yeshiva. It was at the height of his gadlus as a Rosh Yeshiva. He had a yeshiva in Tel Aviv at that time, a yeshiva in a kollel in Tel Aviv. And he learned with, it was a Talmud of Rabbi Zalman, and he was a Talmud of all the Gedolei Yisrael, close Talmud, and a very close Talmud of the Brisker Rov. He married the Brisker Rov's daughter, and he beautifully synthesizes the Brisker system with the other Litvischer system. So I've always found a bit of a soulmate in Michael Feinstein, that there's a beautiful blend of Brisker Derech and a Yeshiva Derech, the regular Yeshiva Derech. And as you know, a lot of the influence in my learning has been a combination between the Brisker Derech and that of Reb Shimon Shkop. So it's beautiful to see how he deals with this. And he deals with it by saying, what's going on here really is when Moshe understands to himself, if you do this in public, the consequence is skila, or might be skila. Why? Because this is like Avodah Zorah. It isn't that you separate out. When you do it in private, it's a less severe thing. When you do it in public, it's like Avodah Zorah. It means that Chilul Shabbos in its essence is so serious that if it's done in public, it's like Avodah Zorah. That doesn't mean, and if it's done in private, it's just a ritualistic desecration of the Shabbos. No, it means that Shabbos is so serious that embedded in Shabbos is a declaration of a belief in the Maaseh Bereshis, in Hashem's creation of the world. And in the desecration of the Shabbos, there's a denial of that belief. So much so that if it's done in public, it's like Avodah Zorah. So when Hashem says, yes, there's skila when it's done in public, explains Reb Michael Feinstein, that doesn't mean Hashem's telling him only if it's done in public, then there's skila. Hashem is telling him Chilul Shabbos is so serious that when done in public, it's like Avodah Zorah, and therefore Chilul Shabbos is beskila no matter when it's done. because of the seriousness of Chilul Shabbos. It has the most severe death sentence. It has the death sentence by stoning because it is so severe. So the severity of Chilul Shabbos manifests in as much as when done in public, it's like idol worship. That doesn't mean when it's done in private, it's like any other Avera. No, it's still incredibly serious. It's just not like idol worship if it's done in private. There could be other reasons as to why the person's doing it. But Chilul Shabbos as such retains that. He says, in such a case, didino beskila havi zedin al ha'avira de Chilul Shabbos, tavi beskila, lo ala dimyon la'avodah zara. You're not getting skila because Chilul Shabbos, desecrating the Shabbos, is like serving idolatry. That's not why you're getting skila. You're getting skila for Chilul Shabbos, for desecrating the Shabbos. Because just for the fact that it's like Avodah Zorah, you can't give a person a death sentence because this is like that, because there's a comparison. You can't give a death sentence for that. When Hashem says it's skila, that means it's skila for the essence of Chilul Shabbos. The fact that when Chilul Shabbos is done in public, it's like Avodah Zorah, that's how serious Chilul Shabbos is. But the consequence of skila, the consequence of death by stoning, is because of the severity of Chilul Shabbos, not just because of Avodah Zorah. Or shall we say, the fact that Chilul Shabbos is so akin to idolatry is the essence of why it's so severe that skila applies to it. And why is it so severe? Because what is it on Shabbos? Tosfos says, and we have it in many places, our Tosfos says, the Mechal Shabbos בפרהסיא ככופר בעיקר. Why are you denying the ikar? The ikar is the root. The ikar is the source, the foundation of all of the world. We spoke in the Adar Shir, in the Purim Shir, which is online now, on the importance of being able to look at the world through what we call the Ein HaEmunah, to be able to look at the world through the lens of Emunah. But if you take that lens of Emunah away, the whole way you look at the world changes, and your whole life changes, everything else changes. We defined Emunah as living according to the world you see with the lens of Emunah, responding to the world according to the lens you see, with the world you see with the lens of Emunah. But if you take that lens away and you don't see faith, you look at the world without faith, then everything falls away. The entire Torah falls away. The way you operate, then you become a secularist. And you might say, yes, I believe God created the world. I just don't believe in Shabbos. What's so serious about that? Do I believe God created it? Well, absolutely. I say Shema Yisrael every day. I put on tefillin every day. I just don't believe in Shabbos. What is so undermining of everything if you don't believe in Shabbos? So if you look at the very last word of the very last sentence of the creation, Vayavarech Elokim et Yom HaShvi'i vayikadesh oto, Hashem blesses Shabbos and He sanctifies Shabbos. Why is Shabbos so important? Kivo shavat mikol melachto, because that's the day He stopped creating. Asher bara Elokim la'asot. The creation, He stopped the creation. Explains Rabbeinu Bechaya based on the Ramban. He stopped the creation of Yesh Me'ayin, of ab nihilo creation. That's what He stopped. We talked in the Adar Shir about the different Nisim, the Nisim of Adar and the Nisim of Nisan. The Nisim of Adar are embedded in nature. The Nisim, the miracles of Nisan, of Pesach, are supernatural. The Sheish Yimei Bereshis was supernatural. Hashem intervenes and does these dramatic things and creates the world in 6 days. That's supernatural. What starts happening on Shabbos? Does the creation stop? No, says the Ramban, the creation doesn't stop. Asher bara Elokim la'asot. On Shabbos, Hashem creates the algorithms and programs that are going to run the world for the rest of eternity, for the rest of time. Which means Hashem creates nature on Shabbos. Up until Shabbos, Hashem is creating the world. Shabbos, He turns it onto automatic, onto autopilot. And the whole world continues to function. So Shabbos is a recognition that what ended on Friday was the dramatic creation of Yesh Ma'ayin, of ab nihilo creation, and what starts on Shabbos is nature. And that nature is driven and created by Hashem Himself. If I don't keep Shabbos, I'm saying that I'm seeing nature as a different force. I'm seeing science as something outside of Torah. I'm using a phrase which has become a popular phrase in modern orthodoxy of Torah umada. Torah and science. That's secularism. Torah and science is secularism. Science is part of Torah. Torah is part of science. There is no division. The first 6 days were Nisan types of miracles. Shabbos is science. Shabbos is nature. Shabbos is the celebration of science. Shabbos is the celebration of nature. The fact that the world can continue to exist and create yesh miyesh, continually creating. And as the Ramban says, on Shabbos itself, the plants are creating, the world goes on creating. It's just Hashem's abnilo creation that stops. And recognizing that Shabbos is a continuation of creation, it's just a shift from abnilo to from a yesh mi'ayin to a yesh miyesh, to the evolution and creation of existence from prior existence. That's what starts on Shabbos. So when a person breaks the Shabbos בפרהסיא, what is he declaring? That's what I don't believe. I believe in Hashem. I believe Hashem created the world. I believe in the Torah. I keep the Torah. I keep kashrus. I daven, everything good. When it comes to the way the world runs, I use my secular eyes. I don't use ein ha'emunah. I don't use the eye of faith to interpret the world and to make meaning of the world. I use science to make meaning of the world. I use economics and finance to make meaning of the world. I use psychology to make meaning of the world. I don't see the world through that eye. That's what Chilul Shabbos is. And so we need to appreciate, firstly, what Shabbos is, and we need to appreciate that keeping Shabbos is something we do every day. It's not just, and that's why we say, Hayom Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, Hayom Yom Sheni l'Shabbos, Hayom Yom Shlishi l'Shabbos. Always we're counting towards Shabbos to make sure that even in our 6 days of the week, we're living a Shabbos-dika life. That doesn't mean that we have to not do the melachot. That's only for Shabbos itself. Just as Hashem didn't do active creation on Shabbos. But it does mean that we need to look at the world through the ein ha'emunah, through the eyes of faith, and understand that every single thing that happens in the world, every event, every circumstance, whether small and insignificant or major and dramatic, is an event that the Ribbono Shel Olam has set in motion and that the Ribbono Shel Olam is governing.